Welcome to Wonderful Wednesdays. I'm here with Mary Alea and wanted to talk with her about her journey as a Buddhist and activist. So, Mary, what are some of the things that drew you to Buddhism in the first place?
Well, I think after having gone through, I grew up Catholic and took that very seriously, and then I got to be kind of, I think I got more progressive than the church was at that time, and so I kind of outgrew that and was, but I kind of say that I call myself sort of released. So I opened the door and went out, but I took a lot of good stuff with me from my years as a practicing Catholic, and including a real respect for and interest in all things spiritual, and so just kind of looking around. I think years ago I first encountered reading Alan Watts' kind of Eastern religion, Eastern spirituality, and I think the universality of that appealed to me so much. The kind of equality within that universality that appealed to me so much, because I also was in college at the same time of the civil rights movement, excuse me, in Omaha, Nebraska. And it was a Jesuit school, and they're big on social justice. And that was kind of a perfect conjuncture of certain things. The Creighton University is next to the near north side, which is a great big African American neighborhood in Omaha, and which was extremely active in terms of civil rights. And so my university was on the doorstep of that neighborhood, and we got involved in a lot of things there. And it was very eye opening and heart opening to me. Um, and so I think that was an instrumental step in and moment in my own personal growth, and kind of idealism, and also not just ideals, but some practical application, because we were meeting with people who were marching and protesting, and really dealing with the hard issues having to do with race, and the law at that time. So on from there, then, I'm not sure exactly even when I first encountered Buddhism per se, but whenever it was, it so felt familiar. It felt like a path that made sense to me, because there were already elements of it that were very meaningful to me and familiar to me. And so as I learned more about the teachings, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, um, I could see more clearly how that was connected to and really related to how we behave in the world as responsible, careful, loving human beings. No holds barred. So that really all appealed to me. And so that's really kind of why I got to Buddhism, or how I got to Buddhism, I guess. So
In these times where there is so much strife, do you find that those same you talked about earlier times of marching and issues of race and in 2020 that certainly has risen to the surface again. How do you find that your Buddhism aligns with um, racial justice and activism?
I think it's absolutely pertinent, uh, uh, and helpful, because I think the highest calling, or a high calling for us as human beings, is to find a way to love each other, and short of respecting each other's beliefs. I mean, adhere in the sense that would adhere to them or find a way to approve of them, we still can love the person who holds those views. And I think so. The teachings in Buddhism that are about loving kindness and compassion, and also about sort of letting go. I think one of the things that I've learned this in terms of Buddhist teaching in the Dharma is to more fully appreciate how each of us is really the self that we imagine we are is really made up of the construct. I mean, it's a construct of our lives, of our earliest learnings and experiences, and so on in our lives. And as such, we've talked about this in our memoir writing, that we're all storytellers, and we love stories, and we need stories, and so we create stories. And one of the stories is that we create the story of who we are. But it's a story, and we're much more than that, and we're much less than that in some ways. And so I think that knowing that and thinking about that, I think it helps me to think, well, it doesn't mean that I don't have solid ground to stand on in terms of what matters to me. Those things matter to me, but it gives me a way to kind of look at uh, the impermanence of life, that everything is moving parts, and that everything can change, and people can change, and so forth. So those are such basic teachings. It's not that they're easy. These are not easy things. It's not. It's maybe easy, it seems relatively easy to comprehend some of these as ideas, but to put those into practice is another part of it. This is a practice that has its challenges. And just along the lines of what we're talking about right now, sort of in times of strife, in times when we feel almost drawn to be angry or resentful or hostile even, we really can take a breath, step back, and say, is this really the most useful way that I can stand in this moment? And I think that often the answer is no. These feelings are going to pass, and I can find something better, and that would be in the direction of feeling compassion and kindness. I do believe all of us as human beings have more in common than we have difference, and I think it's just bringing that awareness or that thought back into the moment when we're feeling so frustrated and all of that. So I think it's, being thoughtful, trying to be mindful, being careful, being in the moment helps us realize that there's always a next moment, and we don't know what that moment is. We just have to do the best we can to step into that moment as conscious and carefully as we can.
What are some of the books or tools that you would suggest for someone who has been interested in Buddhism but hasn't really studied or tried to practice it?
Well, I'm not going to be able, I think, to just come up with the title of a book. I would just say there are many books that are really basic, good books on introducing Buddhism, are online. I mean, there's a ton of sources online, all the way from, from really, really esoteric teachings to more generalized and uh, um, teachings or texts that may be more readable and more. I mean, we don't, people don't have to dive right into the Buddhist Dharma translations to begin, but just I would say, really just find some sources, find something that um, there, you'll find it. People will find it. Anyone who's interested will find it. But I would say that just beginning with the Four Noble Truths and trying to understand what that says about human suffering and how we help to contribute to our own suffering and how there is an end to suffering and what that means in terms of Buddhism, and then the Eightfold Path, which is just about, about skillful living, skillful concentration, skillful use of language, skillful action, and so forth. And it's very practical guidance. And so I think the Four Noble Truths in the Eightfold Path, if somebody doesn't know anything about Buddhism, that's a good way to start, to just see that, because that's kind of the core. And it's pretty accessible in a lot of ways that people that have written about it.
What, in the Chippewa Valley, you're a part of a Buddhist Sangha that meets
Right.
regularly. And my understanding is you've been doing prison ministry, or had done prison ministry for a number of years. Can you talk a little bit about that activism and Buddhism thread?
Sure. Well, my group, the Eau Claire Buddhist Sangha, we has before I joined the group, which was several years ago now, but there was people were already going to the prison at Stanley and meeting with inmates there who have self-selected into a group of people who want to do this practice, and this. So when I became a member of this Sangha, and I learned about this, I just thought, oh my gosh, I'd never done anything but drive past a prison. So I had zero experience of ever going into a prison. So this was pretty interesting to me. And so I became one of 4 people who go there now regularly. Well, since COVID, we can't go there. They don't have visitors. And so right now we're trying to, the prison is actually trying to figure out a way that we can maybe Zoom meet with our guys and so forth. So anyway, though, but for a number of years now, I've been going, we go 2 times a month to sit with a group of guys, and we meditate, and then we usually bring a short reading of some kind, and then we have a conversation. And I would have to say that these guys just jump into conversation. They are so ready to talk. And it's not about complaining about prison life. It's really about the struggle that it is to walk this path in what is pretty much a hyper masculine environment that they're in, but these are guys who have really determined that they want to be different in some very positive and productive ways than they were when they landed in prison. So whatever got them there, they don't want to be that person now. So they're pretty motivated. Excuse me, and they're just great guys, and they're so happy to meet and so happy to talk. The other time, the third time in the month that we can go for what are called pastoral visits. So we have a half an hour one-on-one with one of the guys. So in an hour, I can see two guys, and so we usually see 4 guys on that time, and that's really special, because then we have that time to get more in depth in terms of what they're struggling with, or what they feel that is really working for them, and all of that. So we get to know them, have gotten to know them pretty well. And I have to say, before I ever started this, the others in my group who were doing this just said unequivocally, this is just about the best thing I get to do. And I would say that now as well. I have absolutely loved this experience, and I look forward to being able to resume our visits there. Prison is a very strange environment. I have to say. But finding these men inside who have to put up with a lot on a daily basis and are just trying to find their way through with some dignity and grace and love and compassion in a place where love and compassion are kind of far out on the edges. But they're trying to carry that in their hearts and minds. So I'm inspired by these guys.
And Buddhism talks a lot about liberation. And
Mhm.
so, we think about the prison of our earthly life, perhaps,
Yeah.
or at least the containment of that. And then literally these gentlemen are in jail. So I wonder if you think there's definitely that element of liberation that they're looking
Yeah,
for.
I do. There's a wonderful program. Well, there's so many of these programs in prisons. In Wisconsin, there are 11 or 12 state prisons that have Buddhist programs going. And so that's wonderful. There's a long-standing, very successful program at San Quentin, which has done a lot to sort of transform that prison. Anyway, one of the teachers there has said, well, we are all, each of us, we are all in prison in between our two ears. I mean, we all have our thoughts that we all deal with our own biases, and prejudices and insecurities and the kinds of ways that really make our lives hard. We would call those in general suffering. There's a wonderful story of the arrows that life sometimes will fire an arrow into us just because it's life. Something comes along and it hurts, and that's the first arrow. And those are sometimes unavoidable, and all we can do is figure out how to respond to that injury and that pain. But what we often do is shoot a second arrow into our own selves by feeling sorry for ourselves or blaming someone or trying to avoid the reality that's in front of us. And so there are all kinds of ways that we work against ourselves, I think, without really realizing that that's what we're doing. We're so habitual, so in so many ways. So the liberation really comes with sort of thinking about that and paying attention to that and thinking, how is it that I am making things harder for myself? And sometimes we look at, it's easier sometimes to recognize that ways we may be making life harder for someone else, but I think for ourselves, you know, being that honest and saying, wow, I am just sort of I'm avoiding my life here in some ways. I'm putting some important things on the shelf because I'm afraid to deal with them, or they're just too hard. Instead of giving ourselves the permission and patience to understand what is happening in our lives, and that we can do something about that as we soften our hearts and also not hold on to things that don't serve us well. Holding on to anger, holding on to hurt, holding on to grief. Even, I think right now I keep saying, we are in the world, but certainly in our country, we're just in this soup of grief with so much illness and loss and fear. And so, we have to experience that, but not be undone by it. And finding ways to be active, I think, is one of the antidotes to that. Finding a way to help someone, finding a way to be productive, and so forth.
Where does Buddhism, you spoke to this a little bit just now, but where does Buddhism offer hope, or where do you find hope in that practice?
Well, I think that one of the things that, and this is subtle, but I think it is being mindful, and that means really having that developing on a regular, with a regular practice, a way to affirm the reality of every moment, to just sort of say, this is what is happening right now, and knowing that that's this moment. So it, it doesn't mean the future is going to be like that. It doesn't mean, I mean, all we have to do is look at the past and see how things change. We're not the same person we were yesterday. We're not going to be the same person tomorrow. So I think that I think finding and affirming that as a good, as a good way to uh, to to be awake in the world, in our lives, paying attention, and that we take in so much more that's good, I think, and even the stuff that's hard, we take that in, but we don't let it bog us down if we can. And I'm not saying that's a snap. that's a that's not easy, but it is. I think the hope, Julie, is that everything keeps moving, and what we have, that we, because we don't control much at all in this world, what we can manage is our own response to what's happening around us. Um, not in terms of the different, understanding the difference between just reaction and response. Reaction, just bam, it happens, and that might be a flare up of anger or fear, or even on the positive end, good, of love, or heart melt, or whatever it is that is our immediate reaction. That's different from a response where we can take that step back, take a breath, sort of see the bigger picture, and think, what is going to be useful for me to do in this moment. Sometimes it's useful to be quiet and do nothing. Sometimes that's not the skillful approach. Sometimes it's to do something.
As we're channeling Thich Nhat Hanh,
Yeah.
a little more active
Well, there's so many
Buddhism.
wonderful teachers. I mean, and honestly, with the world of the media access, or the access to media that we have right now, I mean, we can go on YouTube and find videos of Thich Nhat Hanh and some of these other wonderful teachers talking, and they are inspiring, I think, and so we do have that kind of access, and I really, especially in hard times when people are feeling down, and it's not a surprise that that happens, maybe to think, well, maybe I should just go listen to somebody who's giving a talk about compassion, or letting go, or uh, um, liberation. I mean, just any of that, because I think sometimes there's one, maybe even one little nugget of a part of the talk that just hits the right chord.
Is there any last thought, or I mean, not the last thought, but any thought that you would like to share before we close up our wonderful Wednesday here?
um, Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I would just say, last night I had my weekly Sangha meeting last night, and we were talking about um, the importance of compassion in these trying times. And and we were talking, one of the things, that we talked about was how hard that is sometimes when we're just, spitfire angry. and and um the urge, even sometimes, to wish somebody ill, and so, but how hard it is to find that place of compassion. And I think I think that we we have to acknowledge that it is that is a challenge, but when we see in others what we perceive as a lack of compassion, we can also see then I have compassion. I have the ability to feel compassion. Somewhere along the line in my life, I learned empathy, and I learned that how that connects to leads me to compassion, and I have that ability, and I need to practice that. This is the time to call on it.
Right.
So I guess that's the last word, if there is such a thing as the last word.
Well, thank you so much, Mary. I think that we're all trying to find tools and
Yeah.
wisdom, and I appreciate you sharing about your path.
Well, thank you, Julie. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you. And yes, thank you. Appreciate it.